All right, well, let's get going. Hello, everyone, and welcome to our third monthly webinar. And this is the second one that is in our series that covers our Valcom software suite. So we're really glad to have you and that you've chosen to join us. And we as always, hope that you find these sessions informative and beneficial. Got to cover a few housekeeping items before we kick off. So we're going to ask that you hold your questions, or better yet, just use the chat feature in Teams to post your questions. We may elect to try to answer some of them during the webinar, but at the end of the webinar or toward the end of the hour, we'll do our best to answer as many questions as possible in the time remaining. And any ones that we don't answer, we'll try to follow up offline. Also, during the webinar, we are going to insert a couple of poll questions, one to make sure you're paying attention, but also we want to get some feedback from all of you. And then be aware, this session is being recorded, mainly so that we can post them on our website so that you can review them later, or you can point others in your organization, and those who weren't able to attend, they can still benefit from the content. So with that, we'll get going. Warren, you want to go ahead to the next slide? We'll make some intros. I think you're driving, right, Warren? There we go.
Yep, we got it.
So some of you are probably getting used to this by now, but I'm Todd Alford. I'm the Vice President of Marketing for Valcom. Till now, I've been referring to this series as the Chad Show. Chad's been handling a lot of the webinar content for our software suite, but Chad's traveling this week, so we are honored to have a guest presenter in Warren Schimizzi. Warren is a training development specialist with Valcom, very knowledgeable about all things Valcom, and he's going to take you through our overview today of our on-premise software, and there's associated hardware as well, for controlling all the endpoints and other integrated systems that form your paging and mass notification system, and we call that SiteManager. And with that, I'll turn it over to Warren.
Thanks, Todd. Yeah, the Schimizzi show has a pretty good alliterative ring to it, I guess. Yeah, welcome, everybody. I'm the training development specialist here at Valcom. I've been at Valcom for 8 years today. It is my work anniversary today, so I can't think of a better way to spend it than doing what I love, which is sharing knowledge. So recently, Valcom has really changed or increased focus on our training content for our customers, and that's what I do. I develop that kind of content. For those of you that are unaware, we have a lot of in-person trainings that go all across the country on a monthly basis on a number of different things, and we also have a learning management system that we've launched last year, and that content's available for free, no matter what level of Valcom customer you are, whether it's end user, integrator, or one of our distribution partners. You can go through our website, you can find the learning management system on there, and go and take courses to increase and continue your Valcom learning after webinars like this. And this is, again, one of the parts of that increased focus on training is doing webinars like this one. So again, welcome everybody. Hope you get something really useful out of this, and we'll talk a little bit about what we're going to go through today in this particular webinar. And we're going to start, in order to understand a local level or a site level, we're going to understand first by taking a quick glimpse at the ecosystem as a whole and where SiteManager fits in. Then we're going to spend the bulk of our time talking about SiteManager, what it is, what it does, how you can get it, how it comes, all of those things. And at the end, we'll have some time for question and answer. SiteManager is extremely comprehensive. There's a lot that it can do. We're going to try to cover the highlights of all that. We're not going to get way down in the weeds. So there probably will be some questions even afterwards. And we're going to point you to some resources that are available to you after this webinar and after the questions to be able to do more of that type of stuff. So I'm going to toss it back to Todd for a second. We're going to start with a poll question.
Todd, I believe you're muted.
Rookie mistake, sorry. Yeah, we thought we'd kick off early with our first poll question. I had to cough and I muted and didn't unmute. But this will help us better understand your experience, those of you who are online. And yeah, we'd like to know, what type of messaging capabilities do you see most often? And we kind of made this a pick one. I know that more than one may apply to some of you, but we got results coming in. We'll leave this up for a little bit. Looks like live paging from a telephone, which probably is not a big surprise that that's a key need. But that's about 75%. We got about 15% or so scheduled messages or tones, which now that's bumped up a little bit. That's at 20%. And then pre-recorded emergency messages, that's 9% of use. So yeah, I'm going to go ahead and close the poll for now. Thanks everybody who responded, and we'll get it back to you, Warren.
Awesome, thanks. So the reason we asked that question is to kind of focus in on what happens at an individual site. And we're going to look at our ecosystem as a whole. This may be a little overwhelming to look at right now, but we're going to break these little pie pieces down into individual sites. And that's, again, what we're going to talk about today is SiteManager. So Valcom makes a lot of on-premise products, and we always have. That's things like speakers, horns, LED signs, strobes, and SiteManager gives you site level control, local level control of those things. It also is a way to facilitate endpoint communication, sending messages to those things, crafting messages that you use over and over. In addition to that, SiteManager can also control local integrations like video systems, access control. Now, the reason I bring that up is SiteManager may be the extent of an ecosystem for a particular application for a particular customer. If you have a customer that has one site and it's a single company and there's no satellite offices, no, anything outside of one location, SiteManager may be as far as their ecosystem needs to grow. However, we are seeing in today's world more and more and more companies that have multiple locations. They have a warehouse miles away from their distribution center, miles away from their offices across the country. Can also pertain to a school district, for instance, that has multiple schools and they all are independently operated in terms of the campuses being autonomous and independent with their messaging and things like that. Those each are called campuses. We treat each individual location as a campus. And again, each campus has individual site level control of those things that we talked about: speakers, horns, signs, strobes, etc. We can also, after the fact, tie those together at an enterprise level using VMAS, which is our Valcom engineered or enterprise management and security software that enables, now keep in mind that autonomousness may not be a real word, but the autonomy of those individual sites is still there. However, things like VMAS give the opportunity to control all those things from a single pane of glass when needed. So you can see how this can grow, right? An individual location may grow or add or acquire other companies, and those companies can be tied together at a later date. So SiteManager at each individual location, VMAS to tie them all together. And then we also have the added flavor of vAlert, which allows you to do that at a mobile level and more enterprise control of those things. So with that being said, we have to take a look at what SiteManager does, what it is, right? So the fundamental question in what is SiteManager? Well, in its simplest definition, it is a device that runs SiteManager software. So keep in mind, it's a device. It's a browser-based software that it runs. So that means you don't have to be sitting at the device in order to use it. It can be anywhere on the network, and you have the ability to log in, to use it as a dashboard, to do all the control and command things that we just talked about when we talked about the ecosystem from a browser-based. It has a roles and permissions-based access. So someone that is in the security office can have a different level of access, i.e. changing messaging when needed, than someone who controls a schedule, like a bell schedule in a high school, right? So you don't want those people bumping into each other when they're inside of the software. So it has roles and permissions that basically wall off the software based on those different permissions. And SiteManager has the ability to support multiple simultaneous logins. So those people really won't bump into each other. In some instances, for instance, we have applications where there is a full-time security office that's looking at a SiteManager software all day. And then there may be 2 or 3 people in administration that use it for bell schedules. Well, they won't run into each other if they're logged into the SiteManager at the same time. They operate separately from each other. So what does it do, right? Well, first, let me talk about the device part of it. It is an appliance, right? It comes 4 different ways right now as an appliance. What you're looking at on screen is that top part number, which is the VEIP6K-1. K is for kit. And what we've done is we have basically combined a lot of the most requested, and this goes back to that poll question. Some of the things that we do with SiteManager is integrating disparate systems. And some of those things include like access to a telephone system, input-output devices for call buttons or access control, things like an audio gateway in order to take over existing paging systems. So all of those things are incorporated in this one kit that you see in front of you. Some of those other part numbers don't include all those things because they may not be needed. It's important to realize, though, that as a Valcom customer and integrator distributor, you don't have to know how to build that system because this is an engineered solution product. That means that when you come to us and we work with you and your customer, if you're not the end user, if the customer is an end user and they're working through you, to determine exactly what you want the system to do, and we'll provide a bill of materials that will do exactly what they need to do. So you don't need to build that. We will do that for you. That's what the beauty of the engineered solutions part of Valcom is all about. All right, so we've got 4 appliances. We also have the ability to do this in a customer's virtual environment if they are running VirtualBox, Hyper-V, VMware. And it acts exactly like the appliance. It does all the same things. It just resides in their virtual environment instead of on a appliance that we provide. And keep in mind, there's a lot of product development going on right now at Valcom, really exciting things. So SiteManager could look differently in the future. It could be available on more devices. We're not going to rule that out. So it may be even more accessible so that we can provide it in more different ways to suit our customers' needs. So what does it do? Well, day-to-day operations are a very important part of almost every organization. Things like schedules, for instance, and our biggest market is K through 12, and schools run on a schedule. They run on bell schedules. Those schedules vary at different times of the year. So you have, the regular school year, then you might have summer school where there's a limited schedule. You might have things like different days of the year that are determined to be teacher and service days or shorter days or longer days, right? So our schedules are very easy to program, and there can be multiple schedules, so multiple different times of the year or multiple different users can use them. Things like early releases can be scheduled in. There's other day-to-day things like general communications that SiteManager really is good at implementing. And those are things like in a transportation environment where you have recurring announcements that remind people not to leave baggage unattended, for instance. So it can work for all those different types of things. The beauty of SiteManager is that it can change gears instantly in case of an emergency to actually help with protocol automation. And this is essentially automation of an emergency action plan. Like if a organization has an emergency action plan that says, if there is this type of event, we want A, B, and C to happen simultaneously and in parallel to D. So we have all these different things that we want to happen. And the beauty of that is, in a lot of cases, when we talk to people about what SiteManager can do, they're doing all these things already, but they're doing them through different systems independently, which means if they have 4 things that they want to happen in event of, like, say, a evacuation, they have to do 4 different steps. 4 different people have to do 4 different things, which takes time, which in an emergency you usually don't have the luxury of. So this is where the beauty of SiteManager comes in. We can identify those things, we can help automate them, and we can streamline that process. So number one, it happens the same way every single time, and it happens with a single click of a button or the push of a button on a dashboard within the software. And we'll talk more about how those things can be initiated here in just a minute. So in emergency situations and in day-to-day operations so far, the only thing I've talked about is automating things that happen over and over and over again that are predetermined, right? You know that you want X, Y, and Z to happen if something comes up. Well, another aspect of SiteManager that's built in is something called ad hoc alerting, which is essentially on the fly. And I'll give you a perfect example of this. So my niece works in an elementary school here outside of Pittsburgh, and it's an old elementary school. It's 3 stories and it's shaped like a U. And inside of the U is the playground and a courtyard, and it's fenced off. So nobody can come in or out of that fenced off area. One day, they were actually looking outside. One of the teachers was looking into the courtyard, and there's a stray dog in the courtyard. And it was like right before recess. So they didn't want to let the kids out because they weren't sure if the dog was friendly or why the dog was in there. So they had to figure out a way to get a message. And I do have a SiteManager from Valcom at this school, which is great. So what they did is they were able to, first of all, pick where they wanted the message to go. This is all within the dashboard. This takes seconds. They were able to pick where they wanted it to go. And within SiteManager, built in is a text-to-speech engine, which means you don't have to pick up the phone every time and dial a code and make an announcement. You can actually type in what you want, and the text-to-speech engine will turn it into a voice and play it out over your speakers. However, there were, in the music rooms, a lot of flutophones going on at the time. So they probably wouldn't have heard an audio message. So simultaneously, they were able to click this button and send the same message to our LED signs, which they also have throughout the facility, and then click send both text and audio and have it repeat until the dog was basically, they found out the dog was friendly, which was great because nobody got hurt. But it could have been a lot worse than it was if the dog was rabid or what have you, and the kids were released because they didn't get the message. So that's a perfect example of ad hoc messaging, and that's built right into SiteManager as well. So aside from that, in emergency management situations, certain messages carry more weight than others. And we have the ability to prioritize those messages. So if there is a daily announcement going on and all at once there's a stray dog in the courtyard, you want that message to be able to override what is playing right now instead of waiting for it to play all the way through. And we can do that. We have over 100 levels of priorities that we can set within our system. So to make sure that the messages need to be delivered, get delivered. So I'll kick it back to Todd, and we have another poll question for you.
Yeah, this time I unmuted my mic. So yeah, no, Warren, first of all, great. That is a lot of good information. This is probably a good pause point. What we'd like to know this time is what systems do you currently integrate most often with paging and alerting solutions? And yeah, as you can see, this is a select of all that apply. So I'm sure for some of you, it's multiple. So we'll let those roll in. Seeing a lot with again, not a big surprise, voice over IP and SIP phone systems, and existing overhead paging infrastructures. Again, probably not much surprise, but there's definitely some access control, some IP cameras, video management systems coming in. Again, we'll leave this up for another couple of minutes, but looking at the number of folks who've got on the call and the number of answers that have come in, looks like probably everybody's pretty much had a chance to vote. So yeah, thank you very much for that. Voice over IP SIP phone systems is the winner by a little bit there. So good deal. Go ahead and shut that down, and Warren, we'll pass it back over to you.
Awesome. Perfect segue, because the next thing I want to talk about are those integrations, right? As I mentioned earlier, there are a lot of different tasks that most organizations do in an emergency, and they're not always connected to each other. They may require input into different devices or different process and different steps. And that's what this is all about, is basically making that simpler when the need arises. One of those things, and it's not something that I've mentioned yet, and we'll take a look here, is there it goes. We're essentially phone system agnostic. That poll question that just came up, that was the number one answer, is integrating with existing phone systems. Well, existing phone systems are all over the board. So there's hundreds of manufacturers of basically analog telephone systems, which have been, around forever. And a lot of customers, about 70% of our customers still have analog systems because they work. They don't replace something that still works. So they basically want to integrate with that phone system. We have FXS and FXO integration. So we can actually integrate with virtually any analog phone system. But we can also integrate with virtually any VoIP system, whether it's on-prem or cloud-based through SIP. So we have the ability to integrate that phone system into the SiteManager head end. What that means is you can still pick up the phone, dial a code, and make a live voice page over any speakers that are attached to the system. So that's a very important thing. And, live voice paging is still a very effective way to reach a large amount of people in a very quick amount of time. There are some other things that you want to consider, and that's the things like visual, which we'll talk about in a second. But that integration is, again, that poll question pointed out, it's very, very vital, and it's something we do extremely well. The next thing that we can do, and these are not in any particular order, IP cameras is a big one. We have some customers of ours that build graphics into their SiteManager where they can click on an camera icon and pull up a camera anywhere on their campus and look and see what's going on. And we can also make SiteManager do that automatically. If there's like a panic button or something pushed in that area, it will automatically pop up the feed for that camera. And we'll show you that in a bit. But that is an integration that's very popular for us. Two-way radios is a huge one. There are a lot of facilities folks, especially in school districts, that use two-way radios to communicate. Well, we can actually integrate those two-way radios into the public address system to be both an initiation point. So a particular channel on the radio can be dialed up so they can make a live page from a two-way radio, or it can actually be used to hear all the announcements that are coming over the public address system in a school when the person with the radio is not anywhere near it. So they can be up to speed on what's going on in the school by receiving messages from the radio. So very, very popular integration for us. Fire alarm. Now this usually takes some people by surprise because fire alarm is sacred. You usually don't touch a fire alarm. However, one of the most important things that a fire alarm does when a fire alarm is pulled is it releases fire doors within corridors in order to keep egress and access limited, right? So you want people to be able to get out. You don't want them to be able to come back in a certain direction where the fire is. Well, in the event of like an intruder on site, you want to be able to limit that person's ability to move through a facility. So you can also, when the system is activated, release fire doors so they can only move one way within a facility by closing those fire doors. The other thing, and this is really, I want to make sure that you understand that this is not an automatic thing. This takes an awful lot of pulling strings in order to make it happen, but we can override the fire alarm if the AHJ and the fire marshal agree and the customer wants to do that. The reason is, you think about all of the active shooter events that have happened in the past, most of them, the way that they got people out into harm's way was pull the fire alarm. So the people that are on premise have a very good idea of whether the fire alarm is real or not and can override it. So again, that's something that you have to go through a lot of hoops to make that happen. But technologically on our end, it is possible. It's just a matter of whether you really want to do that or not. And then intercom. Intercom's a big one for us. We can have call buttons, like in a classroom setting, in a school, we can have call buttons in every single classroom so they can call the main office. One that's not on here is access control. We can lock and unlock doors very easily through the SiteManager as well. So moving on to some of those things, just to kind of reiterate what we've talked about to this point. And let me back up for just one second. Like, we've looked at the left-hand side of this diagram. We've looked at initiating messages. So now I want to look at the right-hand side. I want to look at message delivery. And there's a lot of different things that you can do for message delivery. Obviously, audio is a big one. I mentioned live voice, and live voice is still a very, very effective way to reach people in an emergency. And the paging system is part of a SiteManager system. It's just, it's an essential part. It's always built in. The audio part, however, can be pre-recorded messages as well. And that can be things like someone's voice. That can be like, I mentioned that quick page when the stray dog was in the courtyard of my niece's school. Through QuickPage, you can actually save anything that you do there and use it over and over again. So if it's something that you didn't think of when you were first putting together your emergency action plan, you can go through QuickPage, do a text and audio message very quickly, and save that as a playlist and use that in the future. So pre-recorded audio is also a very big one. Now, keep in mind also, these endpoints can be both analog. We still make a lot of analog paging equipment, or they can be IP. We make an awful lot of IP. So we're pretty much technology agnostic when it comes to that. Most of the systems that we install using SiteManager as the site level control are hybrid systems. They have some combination of analog and IP audio and other endpoints as well, which one of is visual. And this on the screen is one of our VL520s. If you haven't seen it, it's a very slick product. We've sold tons of these because of what they do. Right now, that's just a static picture. But what happens with that word is it scrolls across the screen. Going back to that same thing with QuickPage and the stray dog, that message would just scroll across the screen for people who were like in an area where high noise and they couldn't hear it. And also the flashers would go off to alert people that there was something going on, right? So, and this also has speakers in it, so it can be an audio endpoint, a flasher, and a LED sign. And that's one network drop. So this is an IP device, and this is one network drop. So you get all of your bases covered without having to pull multiple wires and so forth. Another thing that we can do, we have several different sizes of these, by the way, but visual alerts are for those areas where people may be in high noise areas where they can't hear. Think of things like industrial companies where they have a manufacturing floor that might have loud machinery, or a warehouse where they're running gas-powered forklifts around, or they might have headphones in and they're not listening to the overhead paging because it's so rare that anything happens in that environment. So you have to get their attention somehow. And that's what text and LED signs and things like our VL520 is very good at. We also have the ability to send desktop alerts. So let's look at an office environment where someone may be in an office where there is no paging speaker in the office. There is no LED sign in the office. So we can actually send pop-up alerts to their desktop to alert them that something's going on, especially in that case of an emergency where you absolutely want them to have that information. Now, the way that SiteManager does this, and this is kind of maybe getting a little bit into the weeds, but I don't want to go too far down here, but it's just a rudimentary understanding of a few things will help you understand the power of how SiteManager can be deployed. So those things that I mentioned, like the recorded audio messages, or predetermined text messages, or locking or unlocking doors, those are all put into SiteManager as something called an event. And essentially what an event is it's a definitive act that goes to a certain place at a certain time, right? So first thing that happens is an event, and those can be anything. Those can be audio files, text files. Those can be relays, turning a relay on and off. What happens from there is we can create a playlist. And remember what I mentioned earlier about automating an emergency action plan. That's where this comes in. I'm going to take a closer look here. If you look here, you see this says iLug evac PPL. Well, that's Valcom language for I love you guys, which I'm going to talk about in just a second. That's actually an organization that provides best practices for building messaging that's based on research. So that one of the biggest questions we always get is, oh, great, I know your system can do all these things, but what do I say? How do I make sure that the people that are in my care get the right message in order to take action to protect themselves in an emergency? Well, that's what I Love You Guys does. They actually put together research-based best practices, and it's built right into SiteManager. You can use it or you can develop your own, but it's there for you, right? The arrow that's on the right is 2 events. That is a I love evacuate audio, which is I love you guys, evacuate audio, and I love you guys, evacuate text. So those two things, when something happens within this particular emergency action plan, will happen simultaneously. It'll send a message that's predetermined to the LED signs, and it'll send an audio message that's pre-recorded to all the audio endpoints. So very, very cool what you can do with playlists. Now, I've only got 2 things in that playlist, but it can be as many as you want. And they can happen in parallel. This particular one is happening in parallel because you don't want the audio to play and then the text to play or vice versa. You want them happening simultaneously. Well, there are some instances where you want things to happen in a sequence, particularly audio. And that could be a tone, which indicates that something else more important is coming. And that could be used in situations like in a loud noise environment where the tone cuts through all of the background noise. And then there's a pause, and then the audio message plays where people shut down their machines or take off their hearing protection or what have you. So there's an incredible amount of flexibility built into how you can craft your messages within SiteManager. Now, a couple things. This is another thing that you don't have to learn. You don't have to go it alone with this, right? I'm showing you how to do this, but we have a whole team of sales engineers that does this every day, all day, and is willing to help you do this for your particular application for your customers. So you have a lot of help on how to put these things together. But after the first few times, the muscle memory comes pretty quick, and it's a very simple process, but it's very, very comprehensive and can do a lot of things. Moving on. One of the other things that SiteManager it's built right into SiteManager is the ability to use graphics. And those can be images, interactive icons, which is what you see right here. I'm going to zoom in on those in just a second, and camera feeds, and I'll show you what that looks like. So these icons, essentially, when someone who has the appropriate access level within the software logs into the SiteManager software, they can have this pop up as their dashboard. Let's say it's someone in the main office at a school. So they always want to be able to click this button and put the school in hold or in secure mode or into lockdown if needed. So these icons are interactive. They're not just a graphic. They basically work just like a hard button would work. The other thing to keep in mind, though, is this doesn't have to be the only way that you can do this. Our interactive consoles, which are, basically a small desktop console that can be used for a number of different things, has this preloaded in it as well. And it can work to launch these things like that playlist I showed you just a minute ago. That can launch that playlist from the interactive console or from this desktop or from a hard button that's wired into the system somewhere else, maybe in classrooms, right? So it's very flexible in where you can initiate the same message from. This is just one of those examples, and that is the dashboard of SiteManager. The other thing that's very impressive about SiteManager is the fact that you can import things like floor plans, and you can in this case there's some cameras that you see in this particular illustration, this particular graphic. So there's a couple different ways that they can work. You can click on this camera and pull up the actual feed if you wanted to, or you can have it pop up automatically if there's a button that's pushed in that room. Say, for instance, there's an emergency button in the pool, which is that center room. Well, it automatically pop up the camera so the person in the security office who may be in front of this dashboard all day sees what's going on, so they can get a better understanding of the situation and respond appropriately. Built right into the SiteManager is the calendar that we talked a little bit about earlier, and it is a multi-calendar, which means that multiple logins can have different calendars that they use for different things. This can also be very good in a multi-building facility like manufacturing or, a large office complex where different buildings run on different schedules. So they can still run different schedules and different calendars within SiteManager. And again, that's built right in. Quick Page, we talked about that. There's a number of different things that you can do with Quick Page, like you can make it repeat a certain amount of times or infinitely or just once, however you want to do it. Again, you can be very selective with this. You can use the text-to-speech engine, which is built right in to send text or audio out. You can also do the same thing to send text just to the signs without sending audio if you want to be send silent notifications out, which may be something that's important as well. So
sorry, Warren, took me a minute to unmute, but you got where I wanted to go. I was going to ask if you could take us through how this might look at some different type of scenarios like a school or an office. So this is great. So carry on.
Yeah, absolutely. And what I'm going to do is just do a 10,000-foot view here and talk about some of the things that were responses in those poll questions, right? So some of the most common requests we get for different markets. So you know what to look for. If you're one of our integrators or one of our distributors, this is kind of where it's kind of the things that are most asked for in these particular applications. And the first one is K through 12. And we probably already know a little bit about that, right? So we already know that K-12 wants to automate an emergency action plan. It's very important. It's very high profile. These are our kids. You know, you got to make sure that all of this stuff is in place. And then you hope you never, ever, ever have to press one of those buttons. But if you do, you want it to work. So that's where automating that action plan, the emergency action plan, comes into play. I love you guys. Like I mentioned earlier, is their protocols, their messaging is built right into SiteManager. There's also another one that's very good called Pass K-12. They're not built in, but they're very similar. I would recommend that if you deal with schools or if you are a school and if you don't know about I Love You Guys, that you check them out online. Their standard response protocol, again, like I mentioned, is research-based messaging so that you say the right thing in the right situation to give the people in your care the appropriate amount of information so they can protect themselves in that situation. And I Love You Guys. Make sure that if you do look it up, that you look it up with a U, not a Y-O-U. It's I Love You Guys. Very fascinating story. Very, very useful information that you can find from those folks. Schedule control. We mentioned that. It's a really big thing in this particular application because schools run on schedules. If they're off schedule, then it just creates confusion, and that's bad. So kids are better when they run on a schedule. Integration of disparate systems. We mentioned that. A lot of schools that we run into, you think about this for a second. A school is built and it runs a certain amount of years, and then they add on to the school. Well, when they add on to the public address system, typically they add on with something else. And then 10 years later, they add on to it again. They keep band-aiding it. So when you get there, they have 3 different systems that don't talk to each other, not to mention clocks and, bell schedule might be separate and all those things. Well, we're very, very good at integrating those things together. And the K through 12 market really, really is a place where we find a lot of that request. Healthcare is similar, but has quite a bit different in terms of what their messaging is, like rounding tones, for instance. This is essentially when a caregiver walks in and out of a particular patient room. So the patient understands that somebody's in there, and when the subtle ding over the speakers alerts them that someone's there, and they may not be able to see them. Remember, they're in the hospital. They might have something where they can't tell that someone is there to help them, but it's reassuring. And it also helps them to stay on task and make sure that the patient rounds are done. Code calling, this is, it's becoming less popular. Plain language protocol is sort of taking over in this instance, but code calling still exists. And that's things like you may have heard code blue, code red. They mean something within a hospital. They're not as descriptive as plain language protocol, but either way, we can automate both, whether it's code calling or plain language protocol. We have the technology with SiteManager to help automate that process so it is consistent. Prioritized messaging is a very big thing in the healthcare industry, just because you want to make sure that when daily things are going on, like for instance, during COVID a few years ago, we always had requests from people to craft messages that said, maintain social distancing, be sure to wash your hands. And if that message is playing and there's an emergency, you want that message to be overridden so that the emergency message gets through. So in that healthcare environment, that's very important to them as well. So that's another thing to look out for. I might mention, before I forget, there are a whole series of brochures that are available to you to outline all of these things on our website. So you can go on there and you can find these great little diagrams. You can find a lot more detail than we can get to in this short little webinar in terms of what the system will do and how it pertains to that specific market. So I would highly recommend going and checking those out on the Valcom website. The commercial industrial market, again, they want standards for emergencies, and that is automating an emergency action plan, right? So that emergency action plan for them is very important because they may have different people in different areas that have different requirements when an emergency happens, right? The people that are in your warehouse are different than the people that are in your manufacturing facility that might be around equipment that needs to be shut down or needs to automatically shut down in an event. So we can help automate all of that stuff. Site level management. This is real important when you have a facility that looks like this one on the screen. These are all buildings very close to each other. You got manufacturing, offices, shipping, you got warehousing, all that stuff. In order to, and again, this is back to like what I was mentioning with K through 12 schools. A lot of times a company starts and 3 years later they add a warehouse, and then 5 years later they add a shipping building, and then they add another office building, all in the same complex as the company grows. Unfortunately, a lot of times those end up being different systems. They just put separate systems in it, and then all at once they need to tie them together. Well, that's what SiteManager can do. It can give that site level control so they can operate as a whole instead of independent buildings. Flexible grouping is also another thing we didn't really talk about, but it is in the same area as priority messaging. Not only do you want the right message to override when necessary, emergency messaging or higher priority messaging, but you want it to go to the right place. So if it's daily announcements, for instance, it might be different for an office environment than it is for shipping or for manufacturing. So we have the ability with SiteManager to group messages to go where they need to go so that the people in the office aren't hearing all the messages about trucks that are coming into the dock in the warehouse, right? So we have the ability to group those things, and we're very flexible in how that works. Transportation is an interesting animal too. They use a lot of pre-recorded messages like don't leave your baggage unattended. That's all stuff that SiteManager can do. They also have a very equal and important need for ad hoc announcements like, John Smith, please come to the office for a personal item that you left. Right? So those things are equally important in that transportation environment, and SiteManager can provide both of those, as well as targeted messaging. This is very similar to manufacturing. You want people in some areas to hear messages about their particular travel announcements that pertain to them, but in other areas, they may not be important. So we have the ability to move those and target those messages where they need to go. So who is SiteManager for? We talked about what kind of capabilities that SiteManager has, where the markets are, what they ask for the most. But let's look at some of the roles that are within those different environments and what kind of things that they typically want from SiteManager. The safety and security personnel, they want that emergency action plan automation. They want to be sure that when the button is pushed on the dashboard or the hard button or the code is dialed on the phone that can launch an emergency, just like any other button push, we can have the ability to do that. They want to make sure that all of that stuff works according to plan every time without variance. So that's a big thing for safety and security. Administration, they want to know that day-to-day operations work. They want to know that it's easy to change a bell schedule when they need to in a school, or a shift change tone, or a break tone in a manufacturing facility. So that's typically something that administration is interested in. And again, SiteManager is quite good at that. Remember, you've got different access levels based on roles and permissions. So you can have it so that when someone logs in, they only see what pertains to them. They can't change anything and break the system. The facilities manager wants to know that they can integrate all these different systems, because in that manufacturing facility we talked about a second ago, they might have 5 different systems that all need to work together in order for their emergency action plan to work. So the facilities manager is very interested in that. The other thing that does is it centralizes the maintenance of the system. So if you have one point where everything is being originated, you can tell what the health is of that system simply by looking at it. And SiteManager helps to facilitate that. And finally, IT. management of those disparate systems, and that's where that comes in. So the IT, everything's hanging off a network these days, so it's very important to know that the control that is there is easy to access. Again, with multiple simultaneous logins, you're not going to bump into anybody and mess up the day-to-day operations that are going on. So IT is very interested in that kind of thing. So
nice. So good. Warren, I was going to ask, how can those who are on today or listening to the recording later, how can they learn maybe even more detail about SiteManager and get with Valcom to help them solve their problems? So this looks like where you're headed.
Absolutely. So in a situation where there's interest from one of your customers, or if you happen to be an end user that's on this site, on this particular webinar, we can do a live demo that's tailored specifically to your needs. Like all those things that I showed you. Again, it's very comprehensive, but let's say you only need 3 of those. I'm not going to go through showing you all of those again, or the site. Typically it'll be a sales engineer that would go through this process with you to determine exactly what you want your system to do, and then show you on a very granular level, on a very detailed level, how that will work specifically in your application. So you can request those demos through your, here we go. Wasn't coming up there for a second. So these are all of our sales managers. This is available on the Valcom website as well. So if you don't know who that person is for you, we've got the country covered very, very well. And there's a whole team behind these people, right? So you're looking at the front lines here, but there's sales engineers that are involved. There's a whole bunch of internal people. So we're going to make sure that that system comes together exactly the way that you need it to, so that it can help you with those things like automating that emergency action plan, so that you can provide the information you need to the people that are in your care when they need it. And, getting the right message to the right people at the right time is something that we say all the time here at Valcom, and SiteManager is absolutely the gateway to do that. And also keep in mind, if you do have a facility that has multiple locations, we can tie all of these together and take it even to the next level. If you're interested, on our YouTube channel, the Valcom YouTube channel, we actually go inside of Cherry Creek School District and look at their operations center, where they use VMAS for exactly that, for keeping tabs on their entire school district, which is 80 some schools. So it's a really cool thing to watch if you want to go on there and see that and get some more information. Or, like I said, reach out to any of these folks in your territory. And with that, I think we have some time for some questions. It looks like we're getting right to about that time.
Lauren, there's a question in the Q&A section from Harold. He has a customer who wants to integrate their Honeywell ammonia sensor. On a future install, will the sensor trigger, and they want the sensor to trigger visual and PA. Is that possible to integrate?
If it works on a standard relay closure. If it's a standard contact closure, it will work, and we can delve a little bit deeper. We'd have to know a little bit more specifics on it, but it's definitely something that we've done in a number of different situations. I'm just not sure about that particular brand, but I would imagine that if it is a normal contact closure, it's not a problem. Hope that helps.
Harold, based on your location, we can get one of our sales engineers to reach out to you.
All right, we got another one here from Jason asking about, how do we integrate with two-way radios? Is it just an audio out from a base station, which I think is exactly correct?
Yep,
but
that's exactly correct. He's already ahead of the curve, Jason. You're ready to go. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, we have audio gateways that have both inputs, outputs that we would just pick up off the base station of the two-way radio system. We've done Motorola and others multiple times.
And I hope everyone notices that the training guy let the marketing guy answer that, just to make sure that he knew what he was talking about. He was awesome. So
I didn't blow it.
It's fantastic. Yeah, very simple integration. Yeah, we do that quite often. That's exactly right. So.
Yeah, one more question in the Q&A from Emmett. The SiteManager looks different than the IP6000 unit they currently have. Can it be upgraded?
Yes, absolutely. There are some older versions that have an upgrade path that you have to go through, but yes, they are upgradable.
Okay.
But that's something again that a sales engineer would have to look at just to make sure that we're at the current version or at a version that can be updated easily. So we'll have to take a look at it depending how old it is. But SiteManager's been in use for quite a while, and most are upgradable. So we'll take a look at that more closely if you reach out to your rep in your area. They can delve a little further into it.
Yeah, and actually, Warren, earlier in the chat, somebody commented about the fact that SiteManager sure looks a lot like application server. Maybe you want to speak to that quickly in case anybody comes across that.
It's essentially the same. So
Yeah.
It's just a name change. SiteManager, and the reason for the name change is because application server was a product. It was, basically one way that you can get it. And then when we started being a little bit more flexible in the configurations, and when we start moving forward with products that do this that aren't in that same configuration, we wanted to have a name that was universal. Like SiteManager can apply to a number of different things, like I mentioned, and it may apply to more in the future that are capable of doing the exact same thing as what it does now, but just in a different package.
Another question from John, any cost in the software upgrades?
That depends on what you want to do. The software itself comes with a lot of loaded features into it. It's typically when you start adding integrations like into VMAS and things like that there would be another cost, or in the hardware part of it. So SiteManager, even though I said does a whole lot of things, there may be a particular additional hardware piece for integrations into other things. Like, for instance, we can send pages like voice pages or any audible announcement to different phone systems, but that requires a different piece of hardware in order to send it to that particular phone system. It's not something that's built into SiteManager. SiteManager still does the head end work for it, still does the coordination, but this other telephone server sends those messages to that particular, speaks those phones' languages, whereas SiteManager is meant to be more of a dashboard type of device.
Yep, and on that topic of upgrade path and so forth, in most cases, I think it's fair to say that you should be able to, or with this help of your sales engineer, you should be able to back up, all of your existing, groups and predefined, protocols and response procedures, and then move them to your upgraded unit. You don't have to start over from scratch. That's fair to say, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a backup function that's built right into SiteManager, and we really recommend for all of you guys that are even mildly interested in taking the next step. I would definitely recommend looking up one of the 3-day engineered solutions classes that are held across the country, because they are there's a lot of this information in there that could be very helpful to you. Again, that class is 3 days long. We had 1 hour today, so we can't possibly cover all of the things that SiteManager can do and how it does them. So that's a real good resource for you as well.
Maybe we should just do a webinar on here are the things it can't do, and then just assume it can do anything else.
Be a short webinar.
No, it's great. Thanks, Warren. Unless there are other questions, Mary, I don't see all of them. So you're seeing some that I'm not?
I don't see any new questions. Yeah.
Okay. No, that's great. So, before we end, because we are coming up on time, we'd just like to provide a sneak peek at the next coming webinars, and I'll talk a little bit about beyond that. But just remember, these webinars are going to take place this same time each month, unless we've got a conflict with like a trade show or an industry event or something like that. But third Thursday of every month, 1 p.m. Eastern. So our next one, we're going to complete the series, and it'll either be the Chad show or the Schimizzi show. We'll cover vAlert, which is our mobile software application, and everything you can do with that. Then in June, we've got a couple of key product releases. I think there might be a build to this slide, Warren, but might check. But yeah, there we go. So hidden beneath those tablecloths are some upcoming products that are going to launch in July, and we want to give you some insight into those. So we'll be talking about those. And if you were at ISC West, maybe you got a glimpse, but if not, stay tuned or please join us next month. And then just looking forward beyond June, we're thinking about doing some different topics, like maybe we'll bring in somebody from the training team, could be Warren, could be somebody else on the training team, just to talk about common issues, common things that we've dealt with to help customers. We might bring in our tech support team. What are the most common issues or questions that people are calling in about? And here's the quick fixes to those. That might be helpful to folks. We potentially would also like to do a webinar around vertical markets and how to look beyond, because we are very, very well known for our solutions, as you saw in this presentation, in the K through 12 space. And we've built a fantastic solution, but there's no reason that it wouldn't be applicable to a healthcare network with multiple buildings in a certain geography, or a manufacturer, a distributor. So might dive deeper on that in an upcoming webinar. And then another one that comes to mind is we have another piece to our software solution called Views, which is Valcom Early Earthquake Warning System, or Earthquake Early Warning System, applicable only on the West Coast. And that's because we have a deep partnership with USGS that developed a system called Shake Alert based on deployment of a sensor network throughout that coast. But for those states, it is extremely helpful and meaningful. And the way we've integrated with them just played out just this last week. They had an earthquake just outside San Diego. Our system went into effect. We notified over 250 schools in the LA Unified School District and gave them, at least what they're telling us, 30 seconds before they even felt the earthquake, they were getting notified. And 20 seconds before they got the notifications on their phones, we were notifying the occupants of the building. So it's a really, really powerful system, leveraging that Shake Alert network that USGS has built. So we thought we might be helpful. Again, limited audience to some degree, but helpful to provide a deeper overview of that. So just some things we're thinking about. If you have suggestions, we would love to hear them. You can always hit us at, Mary, is it just marketing@valcom.com?
It's vmarketing@valcom.com.
That's what I thought. And I'll put it in the chat. But yeah, vmarketing@valcom.com. If you have things you'd like to hear about, we would be happy to try to build content around that. And with that, thank you all for being with us. Oh, and sorry, last thing. If you want to see the recordings of these webinars, we'll try to get this one posted as quickly as possible. Usually takes us a few days to do a little bit of editing, but simply go to valcom.com. Across the top, you'll see a pull down for who we are. And there you'll find a link to these recordings, along with our blog posts, case studies, any upcoming events and trade shows, and all kinds of other useful information. So thanks again, everyone, for being with us today, and we look forward to seeing you again next month.